I just had it on my heart to talk about something futuristic with you guys. And I'm going to throw the heavy guns on you. The reason is because I think you guys are ready for some kind of deep study of future events and so on. So we're going to study the book of Revelation, chapter 12. Just to give you an idea, bear in mind that the book of Revelation, you know, it's obviously a lot of there is imagery, pictures, and so on and so forth, and a lot of people avoid the book of Revelation like the plague. It's just for a lot of people it's difficult, but there are ways or keys to unlock the book of Revelation. One of those keys is Revelation 12. If you understand that chapter properly, you have the measure, a big huge key to unlock the rest of the book of Revelation. The opposite is also true. If you get that chapter wrong, the rest of the book of Revelation and other future events will be muddled up and misunderstood. All right. So, with that in mind, we'll kick off with the descriptions in the book of Revelation 12. All right. Then a great sign appeared in heaven: a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out with birth pains and the agony of giving birth. And another sign appeared in heaven: behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 diadems. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. So, just by pausing here and looking at it, you will find that there are 3 figures that are mentioned. The first figure is a woman, then there's a child, and then there is a red dragon. So bear that in mind and think about those 3 figures. We have a description of the woman. A little bit of a description of the child will come now. You will see here. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. Alright, so we'll start analyzing who those figures are, and we'll leave the red dragon just a little bit until we read the next few verses, and it will be already clear who the dragon is, without a lot of trying to envision who that person is. But as far as the child, who do you think the child is? Okay, great. Now, I didn't tell you that, but whoever tells me the answer will not get away with it just like that, but I will ask him also, the person, why they think the child is Yeshua.
Nothing, because I've always looked at it, he was caught up to God.
Yeah.
Into his throne. So
Yep.
it's only one person that really
Good,
can.
excellent. So there is only one person that is caught up to God and to his throne. What about the fact that one who is to rule all nations with a rod of iron? Where's that from? That's a messianic prophecy. It is found in Psalm chapter 2. Psalm chapter 2, verse 7 through to 9, the imagery picture of the Son. I will tell of the decree. The Lord said to me, you are my Son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron, and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. So we have the description of the Messiah ruling the nations with a rod of iron. And in the book of Revelation, obviously, borrows imagery pictures from the Old Testament, primarily. Okay? So we have a description of the Son. The Son is the one who is to rule the nations with a rod of iron, and he was the one that was caught up to God. And also we see that the dragon, verse 4, the end there, and the dragon stood before the woman and was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. Bear that in mind, it's important. The red dragon is after the child to devour it at the time of his birth. So we know that historically from Herod, Herod the Great trying to kill the children in Bethlehem, the boys. Okay, so now that we know a little bit about the child, and we know a little bit more about the circumstances of him coming to this world, who do you think the woman is? Yes, you can speak up loud. Okay, why do you think it's Israel?
Which has a crown of 12 stars, which would be the tribes.
Okay.
It's prophesied somewhere that you come from out of the line of Judah.
You need to speak up, Kat.
It's okay, it's okay.
We're not going to catch you on the.
We're not
recorder.
going to focus on. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background about the woman in terms of church history. Okay, I don't know how the church got it so wrong over the years, but these are the options: church history, how the church has interpreted this chapter. One interpretation, which is more Roman Catholic interpretation, is that the woman is Mary, who bore the child Jesus, and thus also contributing to the fact that Mary is divine, and so on and so forth. Another interpretation over the years that's been proposed is that the woman is the church, and the 12 stars were representing the 12 apostles, sort of thing. Okay. All right. Let me give you 3 descriptions, activities regarding the woman. So that's what the woman is going through as far as action, and also descriptions about the woman in terms of visualization. Okay, so the action about the woman. The woman is crying from birth pangs. She's giving birth, the agony of giving birth. Okay, she's giving birth to a child. Okay, so first she's crying out from pain. She's giving birth to the male child, and she's being persecuted. Okay, when I say she's being persecuted, you can see that the woman fled into the wilderness. Why is she fleeing into the wilderness? Because she's being persecuted, and we'll see later on in the chapter that the woman is being persecuted. Now, let's talk about Mary as a possibility. So Mary, we know for a fact that she gave birth to Jesus as a child. the two other factors in terms of activities that we know of Mary is that we don't know if she was crying out in birth pains. We don't have that description there, that the birth seemed to be going smoothly, rather. And the other very important aspect is that we don't know from historically that Mary was actually persecuted personally, and nor did she had to fly or escape into the wilderness. Okay, so we have no reason to believe it's Mary.
It's also to say that she was clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet.
Yeah, we'll talk about
the
that.
crown is.
Yeah, we'll talk about it in a second.
I don't know.
That will just add to what we're going to say. Anyway, another proposal was that it was the church. Okay. Now we know for a fact historically that the church was persecuted. Say during the time of Nero, the emperor, who persecuted the church heavily. But that's all that we can say about the church as far as the descriptions. There was no indication whatsoever that the church have bore anything. Definitely not Christ, not the Messiah. It was the opposite, that the Messiah gave birth to the church, and not the church to the Messiah. And definitely there is no bearing children in terms of having crying out with birth pains. So there is no reason to believe it's the church. It doesn't fit the description. Okay. All right. Let's consider Israel as an option, meaning the Jewish people as a nation. So historically, we know the Jewish people gave birth to the Messiah. Messiah was to come from the Jewish nation, from the tribe of Judah. And so historically it fits. The Jewish people have been persecuted heavily over the years. So that means that the Jewish people, just by reading the scriptures, looking at what Pharaoh tried to do to the Israelites, the Amalekites, the book of Esther, you see Jewish people have been heavily persecuted, and later on as well. So that is also true. What about the birth pains? How do we reconcile that? So, before we go to the crying out from giving birth, or crying out from being in labor, there's another description of the woman that is the visualization of the woman. So we see that the visualization of the woman is clothed with the sun, crown of 12 stars, and the moon under her feet. Okay, so that imagery picture is taken from the Old Testament, from the dream that Joseph had dreamed in Genesis 37. So in Genesis 37 verses 9 and 10, this is Joseph describes what he dreamed. He says, "Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars were bowing down to me." Okay? But when he told it to his father, to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I, your mother, and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" Well, Jacob understood that he was in the dream. The 11 stars were the brothers in the dream, and the moon was his mother. So the moon, Rachel, representing Rachel, was the mother of Joseph. Rachel is considered the mother of the Jewish nation. And so the Jewish nation was established, founded upon Rachel. So the moon under her feet. The sun was clothed, meaning another name for the sun is Israel. because Jacob was the son in the dream, and the son, and because Jacob had another name, which was Israel, you can see that the woman was clothed with what represents Israel the most. Okay. Now the 11 stars in the dream and the 12 stars in the Book of Revelation. What's the difference? Why do you think it's 11 stars here and 12 stars in the Book of Revelation?
Well, Joseph is
Excellent. So
one.
Joseph,
Minus one.
in his dream, the 11 stars were bowing down to him. He was one of the stars. He was one of the sons of Jacob. And so in the Book of Revelation, Joseph is included. So we have all the 12 stars, all the 12 tribes of Israel. Another facet for the woman is that she was crying from pain, from birth pain. This is in relation to the nation of Israel in Jeremiah 30. Again, in the context, it's talking about Israel as the nation. And it says, "Ask now and see, can a man bear a child? Why then do I see every man with his hands on his stomach like a woman in labor? Why has every face turned pale? Alas, oh woe! That day is so great there is none like it. It is time of distress for Jacob, yet he shall be saved out of it." So in the context, we have here sort of a language that is spoken over the nation of Israel. And obviously the answer to the question, can men bear children? No, men cannot bear children. So why is it then that the men of Israel, in this case, the nation, have their hands on the stomach like a woman in labor? And that is seems like those men are in distress. And furthermore, it says, why every face turned pale. The color, pale color, is the color of corpse, or corpses. And it means deadly pale. Why every color is turned deadly pale. And alas means that it's an alarming sound, or whoa, that day is so great. There's a great day, the great persecution, if you want to call it. It is time of distress for Jacob, or the times of Jacob's trouble. This is relating to a period of time in the future where it's called labor pains, and it's also called the times of Jacob's trouble, and then there's another name for it. It's called the Great Tribulation. Okay? And they're all very closely relating descriptions. Okay? The end result of that Great Tribulation, that great persecution, is that he, meaning Jacob, meaning Israel, shall be saved out of it, or will be saved as a result of it. Okay. So we have all the descriptions that are described in the Book of Revelation fits perfectly the woman to be Israel. Now we'll continue to read from the Book of Revelation 12. Thus far we have had the description of the child and the woman. What about the dragon? Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. So who is the red dragon?
Satan.
Yeah, so we know for a fact that Satan is given to us on the silver plate. So we see that there is a war taking place in heaven, in heavenly places. By the way, if I go back a little bit, the dragon is not only representing Satan, but also Satan's person. In this case, we can call the Antichrist someone who works or represents Satan and works in the power of Satan. And we see that the other sign that appears in heaven, behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and the 10 horns. 7 heads and 10 horns. 7 heads is that he comes emerges from a region in the globe, on the globe, that has 7 kingdoms, or 7 governments. But he's not settled for those 7 kingdoms. He's going to actually acquire or overthrow 3 additional kings and take possession of their kingdoms. So in overall, he will have 10 horns, meaning that he will actually be in charge of aftermaths over 10 of those kingdoms, or 10 countries, if you want to call it, regions. Now, on his head, 7 diadems. So the seven spirits of the Lord are possessed. Jesus possesses the 7 spirits of God. We read it from the book of Isaiah, chapter 11. You want me to go there? So, book of Isaiah, chapter 11. So we see that Jesus, being the Messiah, that's a description of the Messiah in Isaiah 11, verse 1. Starting from verse 1 and verse 2 and 3. Then a shoot will spring from the stem of Jesse. So Jesse is the father of David, and meaning the Messiah. A shoot or branch, meaning in the Old Testament the Messiah. So a shoot will spring from the stem of Jesse, meaning from the coming loins of David, and a branch from his roots will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him. So we'll read, there was actually 7 spirits. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on them. The Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and strength, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. All 7 spirits of the Lord are upon him. And we see that the counterfeit, the Antichrist, possesses the 7 diadems as the satanic spirits. So we have a counterfeit to the Messiah. Here we're talking about. Okay, now this war that we read from verse 7, the war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon and his angels. One other item that I had to explain, I should explain, that verse 4 says his tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. Do you know what this is all about? Pardon?
The angels that fell from heaven?
Exactly. The angels are the stars of heaven, and the 1/3 of the stars of heaven, meaning the 1/3 of the angels, were cast down to the earth, meaning they became demons. And so again, it's a description of Satan, how he deceived the angels, 1/3 of the angels to follow him. Back in Revelation 12, verse 7 onwards, now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. So Satan was defeated, no longer a place for them in heaven. Okay, so the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. Right, so a question for you to tell me the answer. This war that arose in heaven, is it something that happened in the past, or is it something that will happen in the future? Or maybe it's an ongoing, I don't know.
Well, the book of Revelation is a prophecy about the future, isn't
Right.
it? And
I feel like the answer's yes. Both.
yes,
There are some aspects of something that happened in the past.
Yes.
But I submit to you that this hasn't taken place yet, that it's a war that will take place in the future. Why am I saying this? Because of the next several verses. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ has come. For the accuser of our brothers or brethren has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. I submit to you that Satan is still accusing before God day in and day out of the brethren.
Because he's still
Even
around
right
as a
now.
Job. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of the testimony, for they loved not their lives even unto death. What is that talking about? So, you see, if you understand this passage, especially when you understand verse 12, it will give you the key to understand the entire chapter here. It says, therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. If you want the key to unlock this whole chapter, just read that, because he knows his time is short. Okay? That's the key. It gives you an understanding that this war that we talked about has not happened yet, and it's going to take place in heaven. And from that point on, Satan knows his time is very short to operate, because he was confined to earth only. And until that point in time, you would have access to heaven. And once that war breaks out and he's defeated, no longer you will have access into heaven. That's why rejoice, O heaven, and all who dwell in it, because Satan will never be allowed back in. And woe to you, earth, because first and foremost, the devil has been confined to earth from now on, no more going back and forth, heaven to earth to heaven. Just earth. He's going to just focus on earth. Not only that, but he knows his time is very short, therefore the devil will be swiftly acting and bring some kind of a resolution as far as he can come up with. Okay? So, the verse 11, they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of the testimony, for they loved not their lives even unto death, relates to or speaks of that great tribulation, the period of time in which Satan is confined to earth, and those that have been persecuted by him have been persecuted heavily, so much so that they loved not their life even unto death. That talks about that period of time in which Satan is allowed or is enabled to operate on earth free of restraints almost. Okay? So when will Satan be locked out of heaven? That's the good question. Because in the book of Job we see that Satan still has access into heaven. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. So we see Satan has access to heaven, and Satan is still doing his satanic things, and he's accusing the brethren day and night still. Okay, let's continue. And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. Hang on a minute. What do you mean he pursued after the woman? Who is the woman? So why would Satan pursue after the woman? She already gave birth to the child. He can't prevent that. So why is he after the woman? Why is he after Israel? What is he going to gain from that? Especially knowing his time is very short or very limited. Okay, we'll answer that soon. But the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle, so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness, to the place where she is to be nourished for a time, times, and half a time. The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman, to sweep her away with a flood. Okay, so what we have here, we have 2 descriptions of the same period of time. Here we have a time, times, and half a time in the end of verse 14. Before that, when it came to verse 6, at the end of verse 6, it was 1,260 days. Those are very much the same period of time. 1,260 days is exactly 3.5 years according to the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar has only 360 days a year. Okay? And times time and half a time is also 3.5 years. And at the end of chapter 12, we're talking about a short time, and the short time is confined to 3.5 years, where Satan is permitted to operate without restraints. So we have 1,260 days, a short time, and then times, at the end of verse 14, a time, end times, and half a time, which means 3.5 years. But what does it mean that the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle? Okay? So again, it borrows from the Old Testament. The imagery picture of the eagle's wings. Tell the people of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. So the nation of Israel were carried by God on the wings of the eagle throughout the wilderness. First of all, he protected them from the Egyptians. He protected them along the way from her enemies. And he provided for them, nourishing them, giving them manna, giving them the quail, providing water and shelter, guidance and shelter. Guidance, remember, during the day the pillar of smoke, during the night the pillar of fire, and his presence with the nation. So all of that is true about the wings of the eagle. Protection, nourishment, provision, guidance, all of those. Okay, what about verse 15? The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman to sweep her away with the flood. What does that mean? So that's again an imagery picture taken from the Old Testament. Isaiah describes the nations in this manner in Isaiah 17, verse 12 and 13, by the way. Ah, the thunder of many peoples, they thunder like the thundering of the sea. Ah, the roaring of nations, they roar like the roaring of mighty waters. So we know that the flood, the waters that is after the woman, is actually the armies of the nations that are after the Jewish people to annihilate them. So it's not just physical water, but it's an imagery picture of huge armies that gathered to fight against the nation of Israel. And then we talked about the imagery picture of a time, times, and half a time, or 1,260 days. It's borrowed from the book of Daniel. So in the book of Daniel, we see that in the last week of the last period of 7 years there, if you remember, Daniel 9 talks about 77. 1/7 is reserved for the future, and it says he, in the context is talking about the prince who is to come. He shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. A week here is a period of 7 years, not 7 days. Mm-hmm. He shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week, for one period of 7 years, and for half of the week, meaning after 3.5 years exactly, he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wings of abominations shall come one who makes desolate. So one that brings abomination of desolations in the middle of that period of 7 years, meaning exactly in the middle, 3.5 years mark. And the last 3.5 years, he will turn his face completely. Instead of being a friend of Israel, he will be the greatest foe of Israel. And instead of that covenant that he will make with Israel, he will go back on his covenant, because he will bring abomination of desolation, stop the sacrifices. And as a matter of fact, in the book of Thessalonians chapter 2, it says that he will put himself up as an object of worship above everything that is so-called God. So he will be himself the abomination of desolation, the one that will describe himself as the Messiah, the one that he is to be worshipped, and he is the one that will break the covenant with Israel and will begin a period of 3.5 years of a great persecution. The second half of that period of 7 years. We will continue in the book of Revelation, chapter 12. But the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river like the dragon has poured from his mouth. What is this earth opening up its mouth? What does it mean? Bear in mind that that period of time of the persecution is also described in Matthew. For example, chapter 24, verse 15. It says there, when you see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place, let the reader understand, meaning you have to understand where it's coming from. Book of Revelation 12, Daniel 9, Daniel 12, all these descriptions describing the same period of time of the great persecution, a period of 3.5 years of near annihilation to the Jewish people. So, in the midst of that great persecution, the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river like the dragon poured out from his mouth. Then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And he stood on the sand of the sea. So let's analyze all of that. What is the earth opening up its mouth? Again, we're going back to the Old Testament. This is the description from Deuteronomy. And what he did to Datan and to Abiram, the sons of Eliab, sons of Reuben, how the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up. So we see that the earth doesn't act on its own accord. That the earth doesn't just open up its mouth and just does whatever it wants, but God is the one that intervenes, and God is the one that intervened and brought just punishment to the sons of Abiram. Sorry, the sons of Eliab, Datan and Abiram. And God intervened here, and He judged those two. And basically, the earth opening up its mouth means God's intervention and God's judgment. So God will intervene here. In this case, He will intervene in the persecution against the woman. He will intervene, and He will judge those armies of the nations that come against the nation of Israel. They will be severely judged. Then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war with the rest of her offspring on those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. Those would be the ones that will go out throughout the whole world from the nation of Israel. So you see there are from the offspring of the woman. But they hold to the testimony of Jesus Christ, meaning they are the ones that would be designated, sealed, the 144,000, who will not flee with the rest of the nation of Israel, but they will be occupied and will be used by God to evangelize the rest of the world, go out through the whole world. And they're the ones that will both keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. I take it as the 144,000 coming from in their where they emerge from, coming from the Orthodox Jewish communities. And they're the ones that will be given the Spirit. They will hold the testimony of Jesus and will go out throughout the whole world. There are males who were not defiled with women, and those can be found in the Orthodox communities today. As far as I can tell, where those are coming from. And he stood on the sand of the sea. What does that mean? Well, you see, the sea, the land is representing the nation of Israel. The sea is representing the nations. The sea of the nations. The waters is representation of the nations. When it says, and he stood on the sand of the sea, that means his attention now towards the nations. So we have to understand that until here in the book of Revelation 12, his focus was primarily on the land of Israel. And now from this point on, when we read Revelation 13, we will see the focus shifting towards the nations. So bear in mind, in the Revelation 13, there will be the beast from the land and the beast from the sea. So know that the beast from the land is a person coming from the land, meaning from among the Jewish people. As such, and the beast from the sea is a Gentile, somebody comes from the world of the Gentiles. And both are cooperating to bring about the Antichrist to be worshipped. Okay? Or one of them is the Antichrist, actually. Anyway, so until now, that is the interpretation of Revelation 12, if you want to call it. Every aspect, facet of Revelation 12 here can be seen what it means. But the question still remains, if the woman is Israel, why is the devil after the woman even after she bore a child? So first of all, we see that in the beginning of that chapter, that red dragon was standing in front of the woman to devour the child when the child is born. It's very important for us to understand this, because the greatest foe of the Antichrist is who? Yeshua. And he knows this. Satan knows who's his greatest foe. Who will give him the blow on the head while he's hurting him on the heel. That's from Genesis 3:15. That's the prophecy. Now, since he knows who's going to give him the blow on the head, he knows who's his greatest foe, what is Satan after? What is he trying to prevent? The return of Jesus. First of all, he tried to prevent his birth by trying to go after the woman before he was born. Read the book of Esther. It's a satanic plan to annihilate the Jewish people before Jesus is born. And all the other happenings to the nation of Israel over the years. But not only that, but Satan is also trying to prevent the second coming as well. So why the woman? How is the woman involved in the second coming? Okay. So that's the 144,000 that I spoke to you about in Revelation 7. Do not harm the earth and the sea and the trees until we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. And I heard the number of the seals, 44,000 sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel. Okay, so Satan is after the woman for two reasons. Number one, to diminish God's name and reputation. So if God promised, say in Jeremiah 31:35 on until 37, that the nation will always be a nation before him, the nation of Israel, Satan is trying to make God a liar and to say God that cannot keep his promises, and God either is lying or he's not able to keep his promises. In both cases, God's name and reputation is going to be damaged. And number two, not number two, but in the same token, the nation of Israel is dragging God's name through the mud wherever they go. They carry God's name upon them, Israel. Therefore, say to the house of Israel, thus says the Lord God, it is not for your sake, O house of Israel, that I'm about to act, but for the sake of my holy name, which you have profaned among the nations to which you came. And I will vindicate my holiness of my great name. God will upheld his name, would uphold it, and will not let his name be damaged and reputation. So Satan is after the woman to destroy God's name and reputation. And number two, he's after, remember, primary target is to prevent his foe from coming, the Messiah. Turns out the Jewish nation has the key to bring about the Messiah the second time. Okay? This is what Jesus had told the nation of Israel. O Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate. For I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So what are the Jewish nation are to do in the end of the age, in the end times? They are to call for their king to come and rule over them, this time for real, this time earnestly, to call on their Messiah to come and rule over them. Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. Blessed is you, comes in the Lord. That's the way the Jewish people are to call their Messiah King back. But if the Jewish people are deceived, and if they believe that Satan is, or the Antichrist is the true Messiah, then who aren't they going to call back to rule over them? The true Messiah, Jesus. If they would be deceived to believe that the false Messiah is the true Messiah. So think about it in this way. Plan A and Plan B. Plan A takes 3.5 years. Plan B takes 3.5 years. Plan A is to deceive the nation, to make Israel believe that the Antichrist is the true Messiah. And if he would be successful, then they would believe that he's the true Messiah and they will never call the true one back. Okay? Once that plan fails, Plan A, what then would Plan B be? 3.5 years, the last 3.5 years. What would you do if you were Satan? If Plan A fails and the nation of Israel would not budge, would not believe you to be the true Messiah. The final solution, just kill them all. And then there won't be any more Israelites to call on their king to come back. So Satan has a plan, and he wants A, to deceive the nation of Israel, and B, to kill the nation of Israel when Plan A fails.
But isn't that how he works anyway? Even in the life of a current believer,
Yeah.
He'll keep annoying and annoying and annoying as long as he can. But whilst he may be clever, he's stupid because he oversteps the mark, and the person reaches a point whereby there is no one else, so they do call upon our Lord. And the history of the Israelites has been pretty much the same. And they'll see this guy, the Antichrist, and think, yeah, he's the bee's knees.
Yeah.
But once he's settled and the truth comes out, because he will again overstep his mark, and the Israelites once again will call upon their Saviour, their Messiah.
Yeah. And that is true. One of the, I guess, ways in which Satan is being used, if I can say it that way, is to bring a refinery process, to refine, to purge, to the descriptions in Zechariah 13 verses 7 and 8 talks about a refinery process. Inasmuch as silver is tested and as gold is refined, so it is with the nation of Israel. Will go through the refinery process of bringing out of the nation those who are faithful, and those he will turn faithful and bring the Spirit upon them, and those are the ones that will look upon him who was pierced in Zechariah 12:10. So the nation of Israel will once again recognize their Messiah. They will call him upon the recognition to come and rule over them. Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. And they will come, and he will come to rule over his nation. And this time, he will spread his wings over them like a hen gathers her cheeks under her wings. At that time they were not willing. This time they will be willing. They will actually ask for it. So that's for us, the book of Revelation. We have a reason why we're studying the future events and end times. And the reason is because it helps us in our journey now. First of all, we can live now in preparation of the future events, and we know that God is faithful, and therefore we can have hope in what God has promised us that will take place. And as you can tell, God will have the upper hand, and He will be victorious. So we can trust in God, and we can trust in His Word to be accurate and to accurately describe what will take place and how it will take place. And therefore we can rest in the fact that God is sovereign, that He has everything is under His control. Also, in light of the right interpretation of Revelation 12, we can see how wrong replacement theology is, and how twisted it is. And like I said, if you don't understand Revelation 12 properly, you will get the whole of the book of Revelation wrong and the whole of end times wrong. And since that took place already in church history, where everything was taken wrong, the church historically have avoided even sharing the gospel with the Jewish people, saying that the Jews are an accursed nation. They had their chances. They completely blew their chances, and now they have no hope, and there's no point in even sharing the gospel with them, and let alone praying for their salvation. So having
got the reverse now of some parts of the Catholic Church and Protestant saying, well, they can do their thing, but we're not going to evangelize because they're okay.
Yeah, that is also true. There is like both, I guess, extremes, if you want to call it. But we still have the empirical commandment even to intercede for the nation of Israel. First of all, we have to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and in that sense it means to pray for the Prince of Peace to be in Jerusalem, for the nation of Israel to find their Messiah. For lasting peace, we need the Messiah, because He is the only one that can bring true peace. And we can pray for the salvation of Jews and also Gentiles in that sense, because the Jewish nation will be used in the future for reaching out the Gentiles as they ought to do from the very beginning, and they failed in their task to be the evangelists of the world. Those 144,000 will step into that role of the Jewish nation they were supposed to be from the very beginning. So yeah, we can pray for the salvation of Jewish people and Gentiles in this time, because that's according to God's will and perfect outworking of His plans in the future.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Of course.
Do people who are curious about Yeshua, who are from a Jewish background, do they have any understanding at all of the destiny that is prophesied for the nation? I mean, if I talk to Jewish people who are expecting the Messiah for the first time, I don't know whether they could even begin to experience the process, the fact that He has to come back. So, Revelation is still a big thing for me to get my head around. But is there any understanding at all amongst Jewish people that there is a prophetic understanding from Christian New Testament of how the Old Testament prophecies are actually going to be fulfilled?
Right, so the Jewish people, the rabbis, primarily were and still are avoiding the subject of end times. One of the greatest revelations of end times was given to the prophet Daniel, and Daniel is when you understand Daniel, it unlocks a lot of those prophecies. Interestingly enough, the Jewish people are prohibited. They prohibit themselves. Rabbi said, "Cursed be the person who will try to understand the times according to the book of Daniel." And you will not be able to understand end times without Daniel, because it's all kind of muddled up. And so, yeah, the Jewish rabbis have a hard time going into the subject, and those they do it on their own accord, and they're not.
How did you feel when you figured out what was happening to your people?
Felt it's a good question. I felt quite distressed and distorted. My heart went out immediately to my nation, and I thought to myself, the first question that comes to mind is, what can I do? Right? What can I do to, if you were living in the 1940s, 1938, 39, and you knew the Holocaust was coming, right? What would you do? So immediately those thoughts came to my mind, and I came to the conclusion that the best thing I can do is to share Yeshua with my people. Because if they would know Yeshua before that time period comes, they will be spared.
It just occurred to me that the whole idea of tikkun olam, and making the universe a whole and healed place again, and doing the right thing by people and being a good person, is such a distraction, and it's such a distraction, because faithful Jewish people that I know have their heart set on just being a good person in the here and now, and trying to join hands with God and somehow fixing things. And actually, as Christians, it's easy to fall into that trap as well. That you kind of do the works thing, and you don't actually have an understanding.
It's so interesting what you're saying, because actually, the perfect definition for tikkun olam is given by the prophet Daniel, or the prophecy that was given to Daniel in Daniel 9. If you go there, Daniel 9, we begin in verse 23. In the Hebrew Bible, also one other thing that I wanted to mention is that the book of Daniel, in as much as he's such a great prophet, such amazing visions, in chapter 7 he saw the Son of Man coming before the Ancient of Days, and all authority was given to him, all dominion, and so on and so forth. And yet, when you look into the Hebrew Bible, the prophet Daniel is not found in his honorary place where he was supposed to be among the greatest of prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, these other prophets. But Daniel is found actually in the Hebrew Bible among the poetic writings. The indication is like, we don't know if he is even a real prophet, because the Jewish people are having a hard time accepting that what Daniel prophesied came to fruition. They think it hasn't come to fruition, that his prophecy didn't come through, especially in Daniel 9, that he prophesied the Messiah was to come, and before the destruction of the Second Temple. So in Daniel 9, there is evidence, by the way, for this, because when you consider, for example, the Rambam, Rabbi Moshe, son of Maimon, the one that wrote the Maimonides. The 13 kind of rules for Jewish people to abide by. Those are called the Maimonides. The Maimonides number 12, I believe with all my heart in the coming of the Messiah, though he may tarry, will surely come. So, where's that word tarry comes from? The word tarry is basically a nice word to say is late. And how did the Rambam come to the conclusion that he's late? Because he read probably Daniel, he can think of, hang on a minute, the Messiah was supposed to come already. So, Daniel 9, that's Tikkun Olam, that's the bringing to an everlasting conclusion. Verse 23. At the beginning of supplications the command was issued, and I have come to tell you, for you are highly esteemed, so give heed to the message and gain understanding of the vision. Verse 24, 70 weeks have been decreed for you, for your people, and for your holy city to finish, this is the Tikkun Olam, to finish transgression, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. This, my dear friends, verse 24 here, is the ultimate Tikkun Olam. This is the end of transgressions. And only the Messiah can do that.
You mentioned the replacement theology just before.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, I've heard it said twice now, once from the congregation and once from the pulpit in other places, that the church has now replaced Israel, and we know that comes with the replacement theology.
Mm-hmm.
But I keep wondering in a given situation, because in Luke, Messiah says, away with you, I do not know you, who are lawless or Torahless. Does that literally mean that they lose their salvation, if they ever had it?
So, okay, it's a good question. In the context, when Jesus was on earth, there was no other salvation only through the means of Torah abiding. And Torah abiding doesn't mean that you have to be 100% perfect, but it means that according to the Torah, if you've sinned, you need to bring sacrifices and so on and so forth. But bear in mind that Jesus hadn't died on the cross yet. The atonement by Messiah hasn't been offered at that point in time. So, so in that stage of his, say, the Sermon on the Mount and all of that, that's Jesus' interpretation of the Torah. He says, this is how I interpret the Torah, as opposed to the way the Pharisees would interpret the Torah.
So, I mean, Yeshua said, you who are Torahless, which means that they don't necessarily obey the Torah or keep to the Torah.
Torahless also means undermining the Torah. So in other words, like for example, if Moses said in Deuteronomy 4:2 says, thou shalt not add anything to the word, and thou shalt not take anything away, the Pharisees actually undermined the Torah, or made it of no effect by adding a lot of their own rules and regulations to trap the nation under their interpretation of the Torah.
My understanding, and I'll throw it out, is that, see, if we look in at 1 John, first there was the Word, and we know the scriptures there. So if the Torah is the Word and the Word is Torah, and people reject or undermine the Torah, are they not doing in fact that same thing to Yeshua?
Yeah, because like in a sense what Yeshua speaks, or Yeshua himself is the Word. He is the Torah.
So
You
if
can
they
call it
reject Torah, aren't they in fact rejecting Yeshua?
Well, it depends what you mean by that. If you mean by that is if people say for example, Bikurim, which means first fruits.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if people don't bring first fruits, does that mean they reject Yeshua? Well, there is a problem to bring first fruits to the temple because it doesn't exist. Yeah. Or sacrifices.
So I suppose if we come forward a couple of centuries or so to today, now if believers reject the Old Testament, which a lot of them do,
yeah, that's terrible.
now will they in fact receive salvation, or will they be rejected?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So, New Testament Christians, sort of,
Yeah.
it really individually depends on a person. Because, look, some people are doing it purposefully. Say, for example, what's his name? Charles Stanley, remember the preacher? So he has a son,
Andy
Stanley, who rejects the Old Testament.
Yes.
Like he does it maliciously and purposefully. I don't think he has any salvation, for example. But there are people who are kind of innocently or ignorantly, just because they're told, and their heart is in the right place. So you can't, I mean, categorically say
No.
it's kind of will have to come down to individual person, what's his motives behind.
Yeah, well, I mean, our salvation is on an independent
Yeah.
basis anyway.
That's right.
It was just a thought that I've had, you know, these supposed Christians
Yeah.
who have so much objection to the Tanakh and to the Torah especially.
I think they just
you know?
don't understand a lot of that. One of the things that people don't understand primarily is the strict rules, especially to do with capital punishment and those kind of things. But bear in mind that you know, there's a nation that has come from slavery, don't know anything about self-governance, and don't know how to live with each other in a peaceful manner. So God had every intention of bring about both civilian and religious rules for people to abide by, to prevent them, first of all, from hurting each other. Number one. Number two, from cutting off the cord between them and God, and preventing the sole source of goodness in the universe to be their God, and thus hurting themselves in the process by cutting themselves off God. So everything that God has commanded were for the benefit of the people. If the capital punishment was there for a reason, because it would would instill fear from the people to go down that road.
Well, that's how I see it as well, and it, I use the colloquialism. You keep a child out of a lolly shop until he's say 12.
That's right.
You got
Is
to.
it a hateful thing? No,
Yeah.
it's good for the child.
Mm.
It's for his best interest, for the benefit of his child. But yeah, bear in mind stoning children who abuse their parents and so on and so forth. There's a lot of wisdom in it in that sense that will prevent other children from rebelling against their parents.
I don't know if you've observed it in Israel growing up, because I don't know your background too much, but I lived in the Arabian Peninsula for 7 years, and what shocked me there was that the Arab Christians largely reject the Old Testament as well. Partly, and it was Evan Thomas that actually enlightened me on this. He said, for a Jewish believer in Messiah, we have a very strong tie to our history and our land, whereas for an Arab believer, Christian, often from very traditional historical backgrounds, their discipleship or their relationship with God begins at the cross. It doesn't take in the body of history of the Jewish people. It starts when Jesus is crucified and is raised again. And what shocked me, particularly actually in the Jordanian church, which is very historic, was just this absolute rejection of even the word Israel. So not only could they not take in what's happened in recent history to them people in the area, but also that they interpreted the whole body of scripture in the light of what was currently happening politically. So any mention of Israel, any mention of the Jewish people was immediately kicked out. And that's institutionalized in the Arab Christian church. So you've got a whole body of our brothers and sisters in Christ who have got this thing that they're like a filter that they can't get beyond because it's institutionally taught, or the Old Testament's just not talked about, it's not preached on, it's not taught. It doesn't seem to have any connection at all. It's almost like a rocket's been launched by the Old Testament, and then once it's got into orbit, the Old Testament drops off, and burns up in space.
It's
never to be seen
I
again.
would say it's ethnic cleansing of the Bible.
Yeah, but I mean,
Yeah, you just don't want ethnicities, the Jewish ethnicity in the Bible. You just want it to be universal, a little bit like the anthem of New Zealand, God of Nations. There's no mention of God of Israel, for example. It's just the only thing that bothers me about that anthem, but other than that. Point being, let's say this, that the Arabs have a personal reason to at least they have a personal reason, to exclude Israel. What excuse does the Christian church in general have to exclude Israel?